I'd like to speak about an interesting thing which I've actually thought about this morning, probably for the first time, which is that we have several descriptions we give to human beings, which are Ben Adam, Ben Noach, and Ben Yisrael, or Bnei Yisrael. To a lesser extent, we also have a concept called Ben Avram, because we have, when somebody becomes Jewish, we have call him Ben Avram Avinu, Ben Sori Menu, but the main designations are Adam, Noach, and Yisrael. So the question is, what does it mean to be Ben Adam? What does it mean to be a Ben Noach? And of course, what does it mean to be a Ben, part of Bnei Yisrael? So Ben Adam, the way the term is used, it's used to mean that people are all descended from Adam. Adam was a human, and therefore when we talk about humanity, we talk about Bnei Adam. And it's not a judgment statement in any way, shape, or form. All human beings are human beings. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, "Chaviv Adam shenivra b'tzelem." Every person was created with the Tzelem Elokim, and therefore everybody falls in the category of Bnei Adam. What they do with that Tzelem Elokim is another thing. But everybody's created with that Tzelem Elokim, that divine capacity, which comes from having been created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I should say, by being descended from Adam Rishon, was created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Bnei Adam. Bnei Noach is a different term. Bnei Noach we specifically use to talk about, when we use it, to talk about people who adhere, or are supposed to adhere to Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach. The Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, which were given before Matan Torah for all of humanity, are given in order to create a good society. In other words, they are made in order to make people function with each other properly, well, and in a way which is appropriate. So therefore they consist of very logical, for the most part, very, very logical commandments, such as to believe in God, not to worship not to worship other gods. Question whether that is to what extent that applies, but I'm not going to get into that right now. To set up a court system, not to steal, and so on and so forth. So these mitzvahs b'nei Noach, which were given to the children of Noach, were given to them in order to set up a good society. Why do we attribute them to Noach? Many of these mitzvahs were given to Adam Rishon already. Why are they specifically attributed to Noach? Because under Noach, something very new started, which did not exist previously. Before Noach, every individual in the world was an individual. After Noach, society became society. And there's an interesting comment by the Ishbitzer, the Meir Shiloach, who's one of the great Hasidic rabbis of the middle of the 19th century, in which he says that in the 10 Doros from Avram till Noach, it says about every person when he died. Vayamos. How old he was when he died and when he died. I mean, how old he was when he died and that he died. From Noach to Avram Avinu, it doesn't tell us how old they were when they died and that they died. I'm sure you've noticed that before, and that there's a very different way of telling us of those 10 generations from Noach to Avram Avinu than was from Adam to Noach. Okay, so the Ishbitzer says, why is that distinction? So he says a fascinating thing. He says that before the Mabul, everybody was an individual, and everybody could complete their mission, and their misa and the totality of their years that they lived are mentioned in order that you should understand that they completed their mission and then they died. Each was an individual, did what he was supposed to do, and then died. After the Mabul, in the following 10 generations, it doesn't tell us the total number of years that they lived. You can figure it out on your own, because it tells us when they gave birth and then how long they lived afterwards. It doesn't tell us the total amount of years, and it doesn't tell us that they died. Why? Because they never completed their mission. Why did they never complete their mission? Because a new pattern had arisen in the world, and that pattern is that of society, of individuals connected together in a community. And if that's the case, the community doesn't just exist in one generation, the community exists across generations. It starts and then it doesn't finish. No generation, no one person can complete the mission because it's a mission which requires the totality of everybody's involved in the community. And that community lasts not just over space, meaning over the course of Earth and all the people living at that time, but over time as well. Each generation is connected to the following generation. Chazal and Pirkei Avos give us a similar idea. Chazal tell us, it's not for you to finish the work, but you're not free to be idle and not do the work. In other words, no one person in the world is here in order to complete all the work which is necessary, but nobody is unnecessary. Everybody is required to participate in this process, which began long ago and finishes whenever this world comes to its ultimate perfection. So the idea is that the Achdus, which existed prior to, the Achdus did not exist prior to the Mabul, it existed after the Mabul. And that's also found in our Parsha, in the idea of Migdal Bavel. The idea of Migdal Bavel is that Achdus can be used well, and Achdus can be used not so well. But the idea was, this is Achdus. Achdus means that everybody is united, everybody has a common mission, everybody has a common purpose, and the common purpose they decided to use it for, the people themselves, was for Migdal Bavel in order to create this tower. Whatever the Avera was involved, there's several different theories of what the Avera was, but the point is that it was done as a act and symbol of unity of all of humanity. That's Bnei Noach. Okay, so we have Bnei Adam, who can be individuals. And they don't necessarily have to interact with society. Every human is a human on his own, his or her own. You have Bnei Noach. Bnei Noach are people who are part of a society, and they have to interact with each other in a way which is respectful, appropriate, ethical, and as good as possibly can be. Along comes Avraham Avinu at the end of the parasha, and actually it's a fascinating parasha because we have all three epics, all three ideas in this one parsha, even though Bnei Yisrael is technically for Yaakov Avinu, but nevertheless, we have Avraham Avinu is, of course, the first one, and we come to a special mission to bring holiness into the world. Not just to be good, but to be holy. Now, there's not that much difference between the two, at least at first glance, because that which, if you can't really be good unless you're holy, you can't really be holy unless you're good. So therefore it would seem to be very similar. But the idea is that Avraham Avinu was the first person given a personal mitzvah, which was a chok, was really something which is not necessarily necessary for the good of society. It was for his own person, the concept of Bris Milah, and therefore it actually was something which served to unite this world with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore set the tone for the Taryag mitzvos, which are all meant to connect this world with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, the idea clearly is that if you don't have that connection with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu through those mitzvos, you can end up with the Migdal Bavel. And Migdal Bavel happened during Avraham Avinu's lifetime. Avraham Avinu came along and said, okay, we have to do things different. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, yes, you'll do things differently. And there's going to be a special bris, and there's going to be a special mitzvah, and later on there are going to be other mitzvahs by which you connect Shamayim and Oretz. And connecting Shamayim and Oretz together by doing mitzvahs means, whenever I do a mitzvah in order to, let's make it clear. Whenever I do a mitzvah, I have to do a mitzvah in order to bring the entire world to a better place. There is a formula which I say every morning, which I don't remember where I saw it for the first time. I think it's in several Sidurim, but it's a very important formula. Harein mechavein, I have in mind, me'atah, from now, I'll call on every prat uprat, detail and detail and nuance, b'masai, b'diburai umachshvosai, from my deeds, from my speech, and from my thoughts, lachriya es atzmi, to balance myself, as kol Yisrael and all the Jews, as kol olam kulo, and the entire world, lekaf suchus, to the side of merit. It's based on the Rambam. Everybody has to look at every mitzvah they do as if this is the one mitzvah which is going to bring the world into the side of favor and the side of connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's the first thing one has to have in mind when one does a mitzvah, is one doesn't do a mitzvah for oneself alone. Mitzvah done for oneself is a very selfish mitzvah. Mitzvah is done for the totality of Am Yisrael and the totality of the world. That's A. B, the point of the mitzvah is to be machriya as l'kav zchus. What does it mean, machriya l'kav zchus? In other words, everybody is connected together in bringing about zchus to the world. Zchus obviously means literally merit, but there's another term to which it's related. Zchus is related to the word zakus. Zakus means refinement, like in shemen zayit zach, refined olive oil. So when we talk about being machriya som kul kaf zechus, it means that I, with my one mitzvah, which I'm going to do, it could be that this is going to bring refinement to the entire world. And this refinement is the major purpose of a mitzvah. Refinement, as the Medrash says, brought down by the Ramban in Parashas Kiteitzei, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's standpoint, it really doesn't make a difference if you slaughter an animal by cutting the front of its neck or the back of its neck. If Hashem really had rachmanas on the animals, so to speak, he would have made everybody have to be a vegetarian, as in fact people were at the time of Adam Rishon. So, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu lets you eat meat, but he tells you to shecht it from the front of the neck and not from the back of the neck. Why? What difference does it make? So Chazal say, "Lo nidnu hamitzvos letzaref beinas habrios." Mitzvahs were given in order to refine people, or to make us more refined, and it's more humane to shecht an animal from the front of the neck than from the back of the neck. The animal feels less pain, it's a quicker procedure, it's less gory, even though it's pretty gory as is, but it's less gory from the front of the neck, and therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, do mitzvos l'tzarei b'nei sabrios in order to refine people. So, it's not, this is an aspect of the mitzvah. Every mitzvah which is given is l'tzaref b'nei sabrios, to make us more refined, to give us zakus, to give us that refinement, that goodness, which is not just to be good to each other. That's of course it's obvious, but to be good in and of ourselves. And again, it's not just good in the sense that I am being a good person, that I'm nice to animals, which is important and which is significant, and which the Medrash is stressing, but we make a mitzvah bracha before we do it as well. And the bracha says, Asher kiddishonu b'mitzvos v'tzibanu. In other words, every time you do this mitzvah, which makes you a more refined person, it also gives you kedusha. And it's not that the kedusha is separate. The kedusha comes together with the tziruf habrios. When you make yourself a better person, when you make yourself more refined, you're bringing more kedusha to yourself. When you're bringing more kedusha to yourself, the right way, then you're making yourself more refined, better person. And by doing those things, even if I'm sitting in my own room and doing mitzvahs on my own with the right kavanah, then I bring kedusha and I bring, therefore, goodness down to the world. The entire world is muchra. It's balanced. L'kav zchus, towards the good, because I did a mitzvah in the privacy of my own room, even though nobody else participated, even though nobody else saw it, which was again the revolutionary idea relative to Bnei Noach. The mitzvahs Bnei Noach are about societal interactions. They're not about what you do in your own room. As far as Ben Noach is concerned, in your own room, whatever you do is not going to affect the rest of us. But as far as Ben Yisrael is concerned, everything you do affects you and affects everybody else, regardless of where you do it. There's the famous mashal, I forget who it's from. I don't even know if it's originally from a Jewish source, of the guy who comes on board a boat and starts drilling the hole under his seat. And everybody asks him, why are you drilling a hole under your seat? He said, it's my seat. I get to do what I want with it. I pay for the seat. Since I pay for the seat, I can drill a hole underneath the seat. And they tell him, of course, no, that doesn't work that way, because if you drill the hole, we all drown, not just you. So before the Mabul, in order to reach such a state, everybody had to go bad. So, because there was no concept of society. being bad. Right? There is the idea of people being bad. Everybody's responsible for themselves. Everybody's an individual. When enough individuals are bad, so that's it. It's not going to work out. You go back and you start, so to speak, from scratch. In this case, not completely from scratch, but from Noach. And the Bnei Noach are then given the mitzvahs of society. Mitzvahs of society are to form a cohesive, a united, and appropriate way of acting together. But that's not good enough, because society has to have a mission and a purpose. If the mission and purpose is the wrong one, so then that's not good enough. In Western society today, the ideal of society is looked at as being a society which treats all of its citizens humanely, in an appropriate way. But from our perspective, that's not enough, and it won't last either. It has to be that society is not just humane to its citizens and people treat each other nicely, but there has to be a sense of mission and purpose and an attempt to become righteous in order to truly fulfill all the potential which human beings have in this world. So for that purpose, Am Yisrael is put in this world in order to demonstrate and show the way and lead, and whether we do it or not, this is our purpose and mission. And to be honest, we've pretty much failed along the line almost all the time, which is why Mashiach hasn't come. But our purpose is to demonstrate to the world that there should be this concern with not just getting along, but being good, being refined, and accomplishing kedusha. And the Am Yisrael is supposed to be the model for the rest of the world in accomplishing this idea. And this is implicit in the idea of Yisrael. What does Yisrael mean? We know from Chumash, Kisarisa yim Elokim v'yim anoshim tuchal. Yaakov Avinu is told that he was able to deal with other people, but also with Elokim. Also, in this case, we assume it means malachim or other spiritual forces. Meaning that the idea of Am Yisrael is that the person should have that spiritual force which actually works in order to make him able to bring Kedusha into the world and fight Tumah. So who was Yaakov fighting when he got the name Yisrael? He's fighting the Sar Shel Esav. What does Sar Shel Esav represent? Sar Shel Esav represents Tumah. There's Kedusha and Tumah. Kedusha is linked to being good. Tumah is linked to being bad, but it's a whole additional level of bringing about a world which is going to be a more perfect world. And that, again, is Am Yisrael's mission with every mitzvah we do, to bring about Kedusha and take away Tumah. Now, I want to focus on that for a couple of minutes, because it's important to define what Tumah is in this respect. You'll note that there is Tumah on one side, but there's Tahara and Kedusha on the other side. In other words, normally the opposite of Tumah is Tahara. But we talk about Tumah as being bad. The opposite of that is not Tahara. The opposite of that is Kedusha. Because to be Tar doesn't mean that it means you're not Tameh. But to be Kadosh means you're overcoming Tumah. Meaning that Tumah is caused by all sorts of negative things which happen in the world. And it's negative phenomena which are beyond our control and are not necessarily Averos as well. The main source of Tumah in the world is Tumas Mace. Right? Tumas Mace is any type of thing which has to do with Misa, with death, brings Tumah. And that's not necessarily, it's a tragedy, but it's not bad. But what's bad, when Tumah is used in the sense of being bad, it means that there's something going on which is destroying the world. It's affecting the world negatively. We're given an amazing concept, if you think about it, of fighting Tumah with mitzvos, but there's a flip side to that, which is that we can increase Tumah in the world by doing Averos. In other words, the two sides of the coin come together. You can't have the capacity to bring Kedusha without the capacity to bring Tumah. Now let me clarify this a bit more. Tumah serves us two terms. And I don't know why Chazal didn't make a separate term for it, but this is the way it goes. Tumah sometimes means just impurity, and Tumah sometimes means evil. On the other side, we have two separate terms. Tara means purity. That's not what we're talking about today. Kedusha means holiness, and that's what we're referring to. And a person can either be kadosh or tameh, and person can't say, "Oh, I'm only going to work on kedusha and not going to work on eradicating tumah." Surmei Rava Seitov. You have to eradicate tumah in this world because there is a concept not just of doing good and being holy, but avoiding evil and being defiled. Because we know that in this sense, tumah is something which is profoundly effective on society itself. As Reb Noach Weinberg says, that it's a beautiful idea. I assume it's his own. He says that a person who serves Avodah Zarah is put to death by stoning, but his property is mutter, and his heirs, his people inherit him, can keep his property. A person who's part of an Ir Nidachas, a city which worships Avodah Zarah, they're put to death by a lesser penalty, which is by sword, which is considered to be a lesser form of death penalty than stoning. But all of their property has to be destroyed, everything. It has to be all collected into the main street and burned. What's the difference? So Noach said that when you have a tumah for an individual, it's much more devastating because that person obviously came to that tumah on his own. When you have tumah in society, it's not the person. I should say a person is much more responsible because he came to it on his own. When you have tumah in society, it's not, the responsibility is less because, unfortunately, we live in that kind of society. But the tumah is more pervasive. It has more of an impact, and therefore, even though it's a lesser tumah, it affects property as well. In other words, the entire world becomes defiled because of the avirah, the atmosphere of tumah which exists in the world, and therefore, even though the individual responsibility is less, the repercussions are much greater. So therefore, we find ourselves today in a world which is very full, unfortunately, of lots of that tumah, lots of negative phenomena, and we can't. And the way to fight it is not directly head on, because obviously it's very difficult to do that. But every time we do a mitzvah with the intent of being machriya the entire world of kav zchus, then we fight that tumah in our mitzvah in and of itself, regardless of where and how the mitzvah is performed. If one could do a mitzvah together with other people, actually, it's even greater, because obviously our mitzvahs, we want to make everybody good. But even when a mitzvah done one on one's own, one can, privacy of one's room, can have be the tipping point, which everything goes towards kedusha. So we start out being bnei adam, human beings. We became bnei Noach, which means that we are now have to make good societies. We became bnei Yisrael, which means that we have a new tool, which even if we cannot go directly out into society and use in order to change the world, we can change the world with our kavanah to do a mitzvah, and our kavanah to avoid an aveira, l'shem shamayim, that way increasing the kedusha, the zakus in the world, and diminishing the tumah and the wickedness and evil and the negative influences in the world. So it should all be zeicha to grow through our lives through these levels, higher and higher, until ultimately the world in its entirety can achieve whatever perfection it achieves. B'bias Mashiach Tzidkenu, b'meir b'yameinu, amen. Have a great Shabbos.